By all appearances, Vikir is the ultimate fantasy hero. A genius prodigy praised by professors, envied by his peers, and officially accepted by the terrifying patriarch Hugo Lee Baskerville as his own son. But the moment the crowds turn away, his face twists with pure hatred. Because this boy doesn't want to protect the legendary Baskerville family, he's dreaming of slaughtering them. From the moment he was born, he was thrown into a literal living hell just to survive. And it worked. He became a weapon. So the real question isn't if Vikir will betray his bloodline. It's this: what kind of hell makes a son want to cut his own father's throat? To find out, we have to go back to the beginning. The tale opens on the life once lived by Vikir van Baskerville, the hound of the Baskerville family. He kneels before the guillotine, accused of consorting with the demon clan despite his lifetime of loyalty. His life ends beneath the cold steel of false justice. In an instant, Vikir's head rolls as darkness consumes him. Just before it fades, his eyes glimpse an old man. For that, he makes one final resolve that carves deep into his soul. If he were ever reborn again, he would catch that prey and would never live as a hound again. Then suddenly, his eyes slowly open, greeting him with strange noises. In the center crib lies a baby whose crimson eyes remain wide open, carrying confusion as to where he is. Still, unable to comprehend his surroundings, Vikir tries to move his body, yet fails to do so. For a brief moment, he genuinely believes he has fallen into hell. Outside, beneath the darkened sky, the grand estate of the Baskerville family looms over the land with overwhelming pressure. Inside one of the castle's chambers, rows of cribs fill the room while newborn babies cry endlessly into the night. Then suddenly, crimson eyes burn beneath the dim light with terrifying intensity. The patriarch of the Baskerville family, Hugo Le Baskerville, watches the crying infants before him as if they were scraps of life, unworthy of his regard. The servants remain tense as Hugo walks past the infants, deeming them unworthy children, nothing more than worthless scraps gathered before him. Suddenly, his gaze fixes on one crib. Hugo stares sharply, finding the infant Vikir strange as tiny crimson eyes stare directly back at him. Then Hugo orders his men to put the babies in the cradle of swords. The moment Vikir sees that face, hatred surges within him, for it is the man who ruined his past life. In deep detestation, his mind utters the name, Hugo Le Baskerville. Vikir's tiny hand stretches forward as Hugo looks younger than he remembers. That's when he realizes that he has regressed to the time when he was only a baby. In his previous life, Vikir was known as a hound, an illegitimate child born into the Baskerville family. Unlike the legitimate heirs, Vikir was cast into a harsh and impoverished training environment. As a hound, his life existed only to be a weapon for the Baskerville family's dirtiest work, all to make them supreme among the 7 families. He endured it because deep inside lingered a foolish desire to be acknowledged by the family and by Hugo. Then, 10 years after the demonic realm opened, Vikir marched into war to prove his worth even further. They won the battle against the demons. Yet, the reward given to him by the family was death beneath the guillotine. He was executed because he simply knew too much. Inside the crib, Vikir clenches his tiny fist weakly while making a silent vow to himself. He will never live like that again. He longs for revenge, yet he realizes that in his current state, he is completely powerless. The moment Vikir hears Hugo commanding to throw the babies in the cradle of swords, his crimson eyes glow because an opportunity has arrived to get strong. The menacing forest of steels, known as Cradle of Swords. Baskerville newborns are cast into that bloody maze and forced to crawl their way out. After that, they need to go to the Styx River. And in that legendary river, the bodies of children will transform into iron itself. However, the blessing of the Styx has limits, thus, not everyone receives its full effects, and only after escaping the spiral maze of swords can they reach the Styx River. Vikir crawls forward with terrifying resolve. Blades cut into his tiny body, blood streaking the ground, yet he keeps moving without pause. In his previous life, he failed because his siblings pushed him aside before he could properly receive the river's blessing. But this time will be different. The surrounding men stare at him in disbelief while Hugo watches him indifferently. Finally, the Styx River appears, and Vikir hurls himself in without hesitation as servants outside gasp in shock at the echoing splash. This time, Vikir plans to gain the blessing of the Styx River entirely. Beneath the surface, Vikir forces himself deeper, while blood from his countless wounds slowly mixes into the river. Yet, alongside the pain, water seeps through his cuts and into his bones. A great start to his new life. Desperate to absorb everything possible, Vikir covers his mouth tightly while preserving the last of his air and enduring the pain despite his infant body. Outside the river, servants cry out for the young master, but none dare enter without Hugo's command. Meanwhile, the patriarch simply grins, watching with growing interest flickering within his crimson eyes. He calls Barrymore, the head butler of the family, and asks how much time has passed since Vikir entered the river. Barrymore responds flatly that 7 minutes have already passed. Hugo grins because a newborn submerged for that long should already be dead, shocking one of his men. Then finally, Hugo calls out toward the river, telling his son Vikir to come out. The voice reaches beneath the water, but instead of obeying, Vikir forces himself even deeper because he needs more. Water begins entering his mouth while his body rapidly reaches its limit. His mind remains sharp, yet his infant form begins breaking down as bubbles escape desperately from his lips and darkness slowly creeps across his vision. Even then, he continues while forcing himself to endure every pain. Eventually, his vision finally begins fading completely. And at that exact moment, a large hand suddenly grabs his leg before violently pulling him out of the river. Rather than concern, amusement fills Hugo's face, commenting that the child is so greedy that he even drank the river. Then Hugo notices something unusual. Vikir already has teeth. Interest deepens while he continues holding the child upside down before asking Barrymore for the baby's name. The head butler calmly responds of the name, young Master Vikir van Baskerville. Hugo smirks, crimson eyes glinting, savoring Vikir's name as if it were nothing more than entertainment. Looking down at the child before him, he finds himself fascinated by the thought that an incredibly greedy son has been born into the family. Meanwhile, despite hanging there helplessly in the patriarch's grasp, Vikir's hatred only sharpens further. In this reborn life, he will quietly sharpen his fangs in silence while growing stronger than anyone expects. And when the time finally arrives, he will rip apart the master who once discarded him alongside the entire Baskerville family itself. This time, everything rests within Vikir's own hands. Vikir van Baskerville was born as Hugo le Baskerville's illegitimate son. At the age of 8, Vikir was already known as a genius among the younger generation. His talent stood out early, yet the main family viewed him as nothing special. By the age of 20, he had already carried out assassinations, infiltration missions, intelligence work, and conquest-type operations for the family. At 29, Vikir reached the limit of his swordsmanship, a wall that effort could not break, forever separating him from the legitimate heirs. At 30, the gate to the demonic realm opened, unleashing the demon clan's invasion and drowning the era in destruction. By 35, Vikir had endured countless battlefields, surrounded by corpses and endless demon war, slaughtering monsters as the Baskerville family's loyal hound. At 39, the war against the demon clan finally ends and humanity claims victory. After giving everything to the Baskerville family for 40 years of life, he was declared to be rewarded. But the truth waiting for him is cruel. Defamation stains his name. False accusations twist his loyalty into betrayal. The reward for his devotion is death by the guillotine. He wakes up inside a crib after exhausting himself in the trial. The dim nursery light feels unfamiliar at first, but as his senses return, Vikir realizes he is inside the Baskerville nursery. He strains to move his infant body, proof of the Styx River's blessing, this time a better beginning, a chance to build strength from the start instead of crawling through endless suffering later. Suddenly, a faint sigh breaks the silence as a maid enters, carrying a blue chest. Vikir's eyes shift as the maid mutters in confusion over why the madam insisted it be placed in Master Vikir's crib. Vikir pauses, recalling that in his past life no madam of Baskerville ever gave him anything. The maid then sets the blue chest in his crib and leaves without a word. Then the chest opens on its own as a deep, menacing black smoke seeps out slowly. Vikir's infant body flinches before his mind grasps the danger, as thin, slithering creatures crawl forward from the smoke one after another. He realizes that these creatures are called bloody mambas. He forces his tiny body upward, mind sharpening as he tries to recall a woman of Baskerville who could be called Madam, and seeks to remove him before he becomes a threat. The vipers then lunge all at once toward him. He understands instantly that each of these creatures is lethal enough to kill every baby in the nursery. He reaches out with his small hands and grabs them midair with shocking precision. His eyes burn with intense hatred as he grabs the vipers sent to him. His resolve in bringing the Baskerville family down with his own 2 hands further deepens. The pressure in the room shifts. The captive vipers freeze for a fraction of a second, their instincts reacting to something far more dangerous than themselves. And just like that, silence fills the nursery once again with blood smears across his crib sheets. The next day, silent chaos grips the Baskerville estate as servants gather around the nursery, pale-faced at an unbelievable scene. Vikir sleeps peacefully in his crib. Beside him, the torn remains of the bloody mambas scattered across the sheets. After that, all nannies from that night are seized, tortured, executed. Yet no answer is ever found for how the vipers entered or why they were placed there. Only one truth remains hidden beneath it all. The young hound silently knows exactly what happened. 8 years pass, and Vikir's fragile newborn body is replaced by the form of a young boy seated among the other children of the Baskerville family. At the front of the classroom stands a young professor referring to the students as young masters. He introduces the levels of swordsmanship to the students. He explains that those who cannot yet imbue their sword with mana are classified as sword beginners. Those who can infuse even a small amount of mana into their blade are considered sword experts. He continues by describing the next stage, where the blade emits mana in a liquid-like aura form, a level known as Sword Graduator. Beyond that lies the highest stage, where the aura hardens and shifts freely, a realm only a few in history have reached Sword Master. Then, the professor names the strongest figure of the Baskerville family, the Sword Master Patriarch Hugo Le Baskerville, and awe ripples through the young masters. Yet inside Vikir's mind, calculations form Hugo already stands at Sword Master level, so to overturn everything he must reclaim his past strength far earlier and achieve it before the coming-of-age ceremony. While Vikir is lost in calculation, the professor's gaze suddenly lands on him. The professor studies Vikir, recalling the newborn who survived 7 minutes in the Styx River. To him, that alone proves abnormal potential beyond ordinary limits. He watches closely, realizing Vikir can turn one lesson into hundreds, and concludes this child is far more gifted than the rest. The professor remarks that reporting Vikir's progress would surely please the patriarch. Praise flows, but 8-year-old Vikir stays silent, his mind fixated on calculating the years until he can defeat Hugo. On the other hand, 3 identical youths sit apart, marked only by strands of hair. Their red eyes fix on Vikir, and a malicious grin spreads. Hours later, after class, a hand forcefully shoves him as the mocking voice, "Garbage van," echoes. In the shadows, the 3 boys reveal themselves, speaking casually yet with sharp curiosity about the rumors surrounding him. The story of a baby surviving 7 minutes in the Styx River. The story of a newborn strangling 2 deadly vipers with his bare hands. Each rumor is spoken with disbelief. Vikir stands quietly as he listens, then memory connects the pieces together, and he realizes who they are. The triplets from his previous life that stabbed him while he was fleeing after the false accusation. The ones known within the Baskerville family as Hugo Le Baskerville's trident. Highborough Le Baskerville, the eldest with 1 strand of hair. Middleborough with 2. Lowborough, the youngest with 3. Each 1 year older than Vikir, each speaking to him with the arrogant confidence of those born closer to legitimacy. They sneer, calling him a liar and dismissing the rumors. Vikir listens in silence as he is already thinking of dealing with the triplets before they become obstacles in the future. Highborough draws a dagger, pointing it at Vikir. With mocking confidence, he questions the rumors of Styx River durability, suggesting that stabbing him would prove whether he is truly special. He then calls on Lowborough, who understands his mind. Then, Lowborough clamps the calm Vikir's mouth, choking his breath. He cruelly challenges him to endure 3 minutes, promising to bite off his own hand if he fails. Vikir just concludes silently that children are cruel and decides to play along. Highborough and Middleborough smirk, dismissing the rumors as nothing more than exaggerated nonsense as a minute passes. Another 3 minutes pass, and their smirks begin fading. The triplets' eyes widen, their faces turning pale as 10 minutes pass. The triplets begin to realize that the rumor is real, as the calm Vikir stands perfectly still even with his mouth covered. Nervously, they decide to end it, muttering that it is no longer fun and that they will simply let him go. As Lowborough releases Vikir, he watches his hand in shock as he realizes something is missing. He screams as Vikir spits his severed finger onto the floor. The other triplets recoil in shock, their confidence shattered into fear. Vikir raises his head, eyes sinister. He wipes blood from his grinning lips and reminds them of the challenge set earlier. The remaining 2 triplets force themselves to stay composed, insisting that they are not afraid, but stops as Lowborough, whose finger got torn off, acts the other way around. Trying to convince themselves that they are still in control of the situation, Highborough tells him to get it fixed by the priest. But Vikir stops them, asking them who decided for them to go. Highborough quickly tries to regain dominance, lifting his dagger again in anger. He lunges forward, aiming directly at Vikir's stomach, telling him if he forgets who's older. But the blade does not sink in the way he expects. Highborough breaks into a cold sweat as he realizes the outcome. The dagger tears through fabric alone, sliding uselessly across Vikir's body without causing any real damage. Vikir easily twists Highborough's arm as he calmly tells them that in their family, power and talent outweigh age. The sudden move makes Highborough scream as the dagger slips from his hand. Then Vikir grins menacingly as he lifts Highborough's hand and declares they will keep playing until the very end. Highborough forces his hand free from Vikir's grip, crying out in disbelief that the rumors were true. Without giving him a second to react, Vikir's fist slams straight into his face. Blood bursts from Highborough's nose as his body crashes against the floor, leaving the other triplets frozen in shock after seeing their brother get overwhelmed so easily. Middleborough positions himself, fear creeping in as he clenches his fists and curses Vikir. Yet, before he can even move properly, Vikir's kick lands directly on him. The impact knocks the air from Middleborough, his body frozen in fear. Vikir then calmly tells the triplets not to be afraid. Their bodies will recover with treatment. Vikir picks up Hybero's fallen dagger, telling them that if they keep fighting, their bodies may suffer more. As he lifts the dagger, he suddenly says he will consider letting one of them leave the room immediately, as an act of generosity. Responding in fear, Lobero trembles, clutching his injured hand, and desperately asks which of them can leave as the others groan in pain beside him. Vikir calmly says the choice is theirs, then throws the dagger, its blade clattering across the floor as pressure fills the room. Vikir tells them he cannot wait forever, so they should decide quickly. Then he grins, saying at least one of them might stay alive. Silence falls as the triplets watch the dagger. The triplets slowly glance at each other as fear cracks their bond. Vikir stands in satisfaction as he watches the triples fighting desperately against each other. With that, the trident of Baskerville begins to split apart. On a gloomy day beneath heavy clouds, Josh Barrymore, the calm head butler of the Baskerville family, stands before the patriarch's seat delivering his reports. He informs Hugo that the Morgue clan has sparked another bloody conflict over the ruby mines, refusing to back down. Hugo listens without concern, remarking the Morgue clan will soon seek the Baskervilles. He dismisses the matter and asks for the next report, which Barrymore immediately moves on to the interim evaluation regarding the juvenile fortress. As the topic shifts, a faint grin forms on Hugo's face. Barrymore reports that Vikir has earned the highest score on the written exam, and Hugo's interest deepens. He then asks for the schedule of the practical exam. Barrymore replies it will begin in 5 days, with Guardian Knights already vacating the fortress in preparation, while Hugo comments that the fortress must be completely vacant now. Then the butler nervously informs that there is one more matter regarding the juvenile fortress that needs to be reported immediately. Barrymore reports a large fight among the young masters. Even Hugo, rarely stirred, pauses slightly before calmly asking how many died. Barrymore reports no deaths, but Hybero's teeth are shattered, Middleborough's jaw smashed, and Lobero's left index finger cut off. Barrymore reassures Hugo the children's injuries are treated, but the psychological damage is far worse. Hugo narrows his eyes, noting the triplets would never normally turn on each other, given their unusually close bond. Then, Hugo's eyes open in surprise as Barrymore names Vikir as the one behind the triplets' case, the same young master who topped the exam. Inside a room along the dim corridor where silence fills every corner, Vikir stands calm with hands behind his back, unfazed before the Baskerville patriarch. A faint smile crosses Hugo's face as he remarks on Vikir's growth since their last meeting. Vikir greets him respectfully as patriarch, returning a small smile, and Hugo's pride visibly lifts at the respectful address. Hugo shifts the topic to the triplets, calmly noting Vikir disabled his older brothers. Vikir raises a finger as if recalling, then asks if the patriarch means the brothers who have already received treatment. The atmosphere around Hugo immediately shifts as he explains that he is not referring to their physical injuries, but the damage done to their hearts. He further tells Vikir that since the incident, the triplets no longer eat or speak together, their once perfect coordination shattered. Their bond lies in ruins. Meanwhile, Vikir simply stands there smiling innocently, as if he has done absolutely nothing wrong. Hugo then asks if Vikir understands he did wrong, which Vikir calmly throws the question back. The patriarch replies that he turned his older brothers into a complete mess. The innocent air around Vikir vanishes, his crimson eyes turning sharp as he tells Hugo that strength alone decides right and wrong, and he was simply stronger. Barrymore glances uneasily at Hugo, sensing the eerie shift. Hugo then notes that the triplets approached him first and even offered forgiveness to Vikir. Yet, Vikir responds with a faint, mocking smile, hearing that the triplets forgave him. A memory resurfaces in Hugo's mind of the youngest daughter from a family ruined by the Baskervilles who became a nun. After years, she visited to forgive him, even holding a mass in his name. Yet when it ended, Hugo dismissed her forgiveness. Then, Vikir's crimson eyes glow intensely as he repeats the patriarch's words once spoken to the nun, saying forgiveness is only an excuse of the weak who lack strength for revenge. With his answer, Hugo grins. Rather than becoming angry, Hugo agrees with Vikir, declaring that only the strong stand above and weakness is a sin, recognizing Vikir's grasp of the Baskerville philosophy. Hugo then calls for Barrymore, who immediately responds. Vikir is stunned as the patriarch grants Vikir access to the food storage, telling him he may take whatever snacks he can carry. Vikir quickly composes himself, smiling politely once more. In a childlike tone, he asks for chocolate, then properly thanks Hugo. As the conversation comes to an end, Vikir turns around and leaves the office alongside Barrymore. Hugo suddenly reaches out to him, calling him his son. The word stops Vikir in place instantly as Hugo calmly tells Vikir to perform well during the upcoming interim evaluation. Hugo's expression softens slightly as he adds that Vikir should not lose to the direct descendants of the family. Vikir grunts as he hears Hugo's words and distastefully responds in agreement to his lord. Inside the storage room lined with neatly arranged supplies, Barrymore introduces Vikier to a renowned chocolate favored by the gourmands of the Morg clan. Barrymore explains the chocolate's rarity and high quality, noting how difficult it is to obtain, but Vikier calmly refuses anything processed. The butler then pauses, unsure of his meaning. Vikier clarifies that what he wants are cacao beans themselves, specifically ones carrying a rich aroma. Barrymore visibly stiffens for a moment after hearing the request. To his lord. After that, Vikier immediately eats one bean from a pouch of fuchsia, bloody beans given by the cook. The cook explains that a single bean can yield nearly 100 liters of chocolate once processed. The bitterness twists Vikier's face despite his composure. Barrymore watches quietly, assuming he simply loves chocolate enough to eat the beans raw. In Barrymore's mind, Vikier has cleverly bypassed the restrictions to claim the chocolate he wants, a thought that almost makes him admire the child. The cook politely asks if the beans should be processed and sent to Vikier's room. Vikier immediately refuses as he states that he will take them as they are. Barrymore adjusts his glasses, stunned by the strange preference. In truth, Vikier never intended to eat the chocolate but will be used in the practical examination happening in 5 days. 5 days later, the students gather on the dark field for the practical exam. Vikier stands calmly among them with a confident smile on his face. Yet beneath Vikier's smile hides something darker. He thinks of the massive catastrophe soon to unfold, a disaster never seen in Baskerville history. In this world, the Baskerville family is feared as the Berserker family, where children are forced into ruthless training from the moment they were born. From their first steps, children are forced to run steep mountains endlessly, never allowed to stop outside brief rests. Even sleep offers no comfort, as they are forced to rest beside monster corpses, enduring the stench of blood and death through the night. At 8 years old, the brutal upbringing ends. The young hounds begin deadly evaluations. This cruel system is why the Baskerville family is feared throughout the lands as the Berserker family. Now the practical evaluation begins as young masters with swords gather at the dangerous Le Rouge et Le Noir mountain on Baskerville's outskirts. Standing before the young hounds is a tall man wearing a dark suit. Pavlov van Baskerville, one of the Baskerville instructors, and his shadow dog coldly explains the contents of the practical evaluation. He states that they must survive a month in the mountain, hunting dangerous monsters to stay alive. The young hounds listen nervously as Pavlov lists the points. 10 for surviving alone, 30 for surviving unscathed, 50 for causing others to fail, 70 for monster hunts, 90 for meeting all conditions. Stealing badges adds more, but death earns nothing, and there are no perfect points. He reminds them of Hugo's teaching that a swordsman dies the moment arrogance enters their heart. Pavlov warns them to stay within the designated zones, for the mountain hides unknown dangers. While in the exam, the shadow dogs will silently observe and grade their every move. As the briefing ends, students glance toward Vikier. Rumors of the Styx River and vipers already spreading through the fortress. With Vikier now the top scorer in the written exam, many grow curious to see if he is just as terrifying in combat as in the stories. As the young masters murmur, Vikier quietly recalls the moment he first entered the Le Rouge et Le Noir mountain in his past life. As he walks forward calmly, the Baskerville triplets nearby instinctively avoid meeting his gaze. At the front, Pavlov calmly raises his hand, holding a bell, declaring the exam begins with the bell. The bell echoes loudly along with his cold prayer for their fortune. And just like that, every young master vanishes into the forest. Vikier moves at once, aiming to secure the advantageous spot he discovered during last year's evaluation in his past life. While moving through the forest, one student thinks Vikier will not survive, while others schemes to capture his target. Meanwhile, the triplets move together nearby, yet their teamwork has already collapsed. Each brother clings to his own thoughts, refusing to truly cooperate with the others. Back at the starting area, Pavlov smokes calmly as he observes the chaos. His thought wanders that killing is not encouraged but not forbidden, with point deductions for murder that most students avoid unless necessary. While smoking, a bleeding young master lies surrounded by massive white wolves. Even so, Pavlov simply lifts his cigarette and barely reacts, muttering that the shadow dogs will try to keep casualties low. At the same time, one of the shadow dogs hides behind a tree. From a distance, he watches in confusion as Vikier calmly heads toward the restricted area, casually waving a tree branch. From a distance, he watches Vikier, thinking of him as the genius who stood out since childhood and expecting him to soon display impressive survival skills. Instead, Vikier arrives near a massive dead tree with no leaves on its branches. He checks the ground with his stick before concluding that the soil is still soft enough for his plans. With that, he decides that this will be his temporary resting place. He stretches casually and decides to relax. The guard watches in disbelief, unable to comprehend Vikier's actions. Vikir calmly gathers logs while the other students desperately fight with swords. As he sweats himself in building something, some are battling monsters for survival. As he finishes, Vikir rests, laid back in his newly built simple shelter. The shadow dog stands stunned and disappointed. The man sees only Vikir doing nothing worthy of the rumors, time passing as he hunts just enough to survive while avoiding needless conflict. Eventually, the guard concludes, Vikir's plan is simply to hide until the exam ends, dismissing the genius rumors as fake, and leaves after finding no reason to watch such boring behavior. The moment Vikir notices the guard's presence vanish, his expression shifts completely as the relaxed atmosphere disappears in an instant. Watching the bonfire, he is reminded of his old scouting days. A memory resurfaces of a man by the campfire, telling him that cacao beans remove the fishy smell from cooked meat. Back in the present, Vikir quietly places the bloody beans into the fire, their rich aroma spreading through the forest as they burn. He lifts his head knowing the observer is finally gone. He calmly declares his preparation is complete. And finally, Vikir smiles as he decides to begin his hunt. A few days later, a fence appears marked with skull warnings. Vikir walks calmly inside the restricted area with his sword behind his back. Vikir walks across terrain unknown to most, yet familiar to him, recalling countless scouting missions through these mountains in his past life. Suddenly, a burning smell pierces through his nose. Vikir notices the burnt tree roots and becomes certain a monster's habitat lies somewhere nearby. Then a rustling sound echoes nearby. Vikir turns his gaze and spots the burning stool on the ground. Only one monster in this mountain leaves such traces, and a low growl erupts from the darkness. Despite the overwhelming danger, Vikir stands watching with quiet amusement as the massive beast appears, one he had considered a nuisance during his past life scouting days. Above Vikir, standing upon the ridge of the mountain, is a giant black dog engulfed in flames as he mutters its name, Hellhound. Then, the creature opens its mouth and releases a roar resembling something straight from hell itself. A monster ranked at risk level B+ stands 3 meters tall, its bite leaving survival nearly impossible as sulfuric flames burst from its mouth and eyes, spreading like gas and igniting violently until everything burns away without end. The Hellhound suddenly leaps down from the ridge, a lookout monster that swallowed the hellfires of the oil world itself. In his previous life, Vikir barely defeated one at 18 after countless battles and years of experience, but now in his 8-year-old body, the situation is far more impossible. Yet, Vikir only smirks, because he already knows how to kill it even in his current body. As the Hellhound leaps to charge, Vikir mirrors its movement. Vikir then instantly moves to the side and narrowly dodges its attack. The giant beast crashes straight ahead without immediately turning. Vikir shows the first weakness of Hellhounds that moves poorly outside straight-line charges. For a brief moment, confusion flickers within the creature as it realizes its target is not where it expected. Vikir confidently takes out water from his bottle and pours it onto the ground. The Hellhound's second weakness reveals itself as even shallow water disrupts its movement. As it charges again, the flaming beast hesitates before forcing itself forward, but its speed drops noticeably upon crossing on the wet ground. Even so, the beast charges straight at Vikir with jaws opening wide to tear him apart, and that is exactly what he was waiting for. The weakness common to all canine monsters opening their mouths while charging. Vikir calmly tosses a bloody bean directly into the creature's mouth before effortlessly dodging the attack again. The Hellhound lands heavily and turns back toward him while growling aggressively, not even realizing what entered its body. Then suddenly, its entire body convulses violently. The giant monster crashes to the ground, writhing in agony as Vikir calmly holds another bloody bean in his hand and mutters that chocolate is poison to canines. A single bloody bean that produces 100 liters of chocolates floods the beast, and the battle ends instantly as the Hellhound jerks helplessly while life fades away. A grinning Vikir draws his short sword, muttering that even the hounds of hell cannot win against chocolate. Vikir checks as the poison has already spread through the Hellhound's stomach and heart, but its thick ribs make direct attacks difficult, so he targets the weak point where the ribs leave a narrow opening. And without hesitation, he thrusts his sword violently into the creature's kidney, letting out a final whimper. And without guilt or emotion, Vikir pulls the blade back out from the corpse. The creature's fiery blaze dims, sparks flicker out. Soon after, a faint blue smoke-like aura begins rising from the dead monster. The aura then seeps into Vikir's body. The power gained from defeating monsters is called XP or Karma, which strengthens the executor's body over time. As the final traces of energy settle into him, Vikir swings his sword lightly and feels the blade already grow lighter, thinking he may regain his former strength long before adulthood. Vikir gazes at the fallen Hellhound and wonders what face Hugo Le Baskerville will show when an 8-year-old returns bearing a monster ranked B+ in risk. A grin spreads across his face, for with this achievement he has already secured first place in the practical exam, and more importantly, he knows exactly what reward he will claim afterward. He plans to demand a reward he never dared dream of in his past life. A treasure whose true value remains unknown in this era, and this time, Vikir intends to claim it for himself. As Vikir decides to cut off the hellhound's head and bring it back as proof, something suddenly moves behind him. He looks behind where the sound came from. A low growl echoes through the forest as multiple hellhounds emerge one after another from the darkness with furious rumbling throats. Vikir looks at the fallen hellhound and realizes the others must have heard its dying cries. He then mockingly asks if they came all this way just to avenge one of their own. With a faint grin, he remarks how strangely touching that sounds from creatures born in hell, and in a single clean movement, one hellhound's head flies off. Holding the severed head calmly in one hand, Vikir smirks. He tells them he never intends on killing only one while taunting the hellhounds confidently, as he still has plenty of bloody beans left. Suddenly, a massive shadow looms over the forest and the hellhounds freeze, their aggression vanishing as fear overtakes them completely. Vikir's eyes widen in confusion by the creature's sudden reaction to his bloodlust. As what he knows, these monsters do not even yield until their deaths, making their sudden stillness, like frightened prey, feel utterly unnatural. He turns around, realizing something. A giant three-headed figure emerges from the darkness. Purple flames burn violently around its massive body as three mouths growl with sounds far more terrifying than anything the hellhounds produced earlier. Vikir is stunned, seeing a Cerberus monster in front of him. His mind wonders as how an A+ monster that dwells in the 7th ridge of the mountain appears in the first ridge where students are tested utterly impossible. Then his eyes catch something else. The monster Cerberus is injured. Watching closely, he sees arrows lodged deep in its body and cuts across burning flesh, realizing someone had been hunting it before it escaped here. And instantly, Vikir understands the situation. The monster fled all the way to the first ridge while escaping pursuit of the barbarian tribe beyond the Rouge et Le Noir mountain. With the injured A+ monster, Vikir sees a dangerous chance before him, and with sharpened eyes, he resolves that no matter what happens, he will kill it. Ever since returning to the past, no one knows that Vikir can imbue mana on his sword, and that he mastered the Baskerville third technique. With this, his combat ability already rivals the adult hounds of the family. The serious Vikir puts his mana-imbued sword in front of him as he prepares to fight. Then he charges forward to the Cerberus with frightening speed. In an instant, he attacks the middle head of the monster as the mana burst upon its impact. One of the other heads instantly lunges toward him with massive fangs, yet Vikir slashes across its face easily. Confidence fills his crimson eyes. An injured Cerberus is still dangerous, but to him, it feels possible. Before regression, Vikir had honed his swordsmanship across endless demon battlefields until every strike carried no wasted motion, sharpened only for survival. And now those experiences fuse with the strength of a body blessed by the Styx River, Vikir unleashes a rapid barrage of slashes against the wounded Cerberus. For a brief moment, it seems to work against it, but then the Cerberus lets out a sinister grin. Vikir became overconfident and thought it was working. A massive claw suddenly whips toward him with monstrous force. Vikir instinctively raises his sword to block, but the overwhelming force explodes through his arms, shattering the blade instantly and breaking his defense. That's when he realized he let his guard down, and for that, the monster's claws spare not a second. His body flies as he receives a tremendous single attack. Vikir's small body then slams hard against a tree with a sickening impact, powerful enough to shake the entire trunk. Pain explodes through his back while blood bursts from his mouth. A window reveals the Cerberus with risk rating a+. It is also known as the Watchdog of Hell and the ultimate lookout monster. Standing 7 meters tall, it first appears in the 7th ridge of Le Rouge et Le Noir mountain. It ignores those entering the underground where dead spirits gather but tears apart anyone who tries to escape, shredding them like rags. Vikir's vision suddenly goes dark as his body remains slumped against the ground after the brutal slam. Then his eyes immediately snap open again. After losing consciousness from the attack, Vikir quickly forces himself back into awareness while the massive three-headed monster slowly approaches him. A sudden jolt of pain shoots through his left arm. At first, he assumes the limb has been ripped off entirely by the earlier attack. Vikir quickly looks down and sees his arm still attached, the Cerberus's claws having only torn deep into his flesh and ripped through his uniform instead of severing it completely. Vikir understands that the Styx River's blessing helps him minimize the attack of an injured A+ ranked monster. Vikir cheers for the river as the Cerberus lunges again, and at the last second, he barely evades. Its strike crashing into a massive tree and obliterating the trunk in one violent blow. With the monster's strength, Vikir thinks that another direct hit will absolutely kill him. Difficult voyage. That is what experienced hunters call situations where survival itself becomes uncertain. Then Vikir concludes that the smartest choice for him is to turn and run away, ensuring self-preservation comes first. Running through the forest, Vikir realizes Cerberus should have killed him instantly if not for its wounds. then instantly thank the barbarian tribe who unknowingly gives him a chance to survive. Ahead of him, the iron fence separating the restricted area finally comes into view. Vikir grabs onto the iron fence and forcefully jumps over it to reach the place he prepared earlier before he gets caught. The Cerberus tears through the fence as furious roars echo through the mountain. Vikir keeps running without looking back. His eyes continue scanning the terrain and the ground ahead, searching for the exact place he prepared earlier. Then finally, he finds it, just a kilometers away. Vikir desperately runs toward it. Just a little more. Just a little closer towards his trump card. Behind him, the Cerberus rapidly closes the distance. Then, in an instant, his muscles coil tightly before exploding upward in a single motion as he launches himself into the air, vaulting away from the charging Cerberus at the very last second. The giant beast surges forward to him. Its mouth opens wide, trying to devour him as his body remains barely beyond its reach by a single inch. Then, the Cerberus steps directly onto the area marked with crossed stones. The ground instantly, the giant beast crashes violently into the hidden pit below. At the same time, Vikir lands heavily onto the ground himself, his back slamming painfully against the earth as a groan escapes from him. Finally, he exhales deeply. Panting heavily, Vikir slowly lifts his eyes toward the Cerberus fallen in his wooden version of the Cradle of Swords. Vikir slowly pushes himself back onto his feet while wiping sweat from his drenched face. The trap he originally prepared for hellhounds would end up capturing a Cerberus instead. Suddenly, the two heads of the Cerberus vomit violently as the wooden spears piercing its body are coated with bloody bean essence. Realizing that Cerberus is of the same canine species, the poison works perfectly against it too. Yet, the middle head continues growling fiercely at Vikir, seemingly resisting the poison far better than the others. Knowing the high-ranking beast will not die instantly, Vikir calmly fixes his stance and channels mana into the spear he tightly grips. Then, in an instant, he throws the spear with full force, launching forward like lightning. But the spear fails to fully pierce Cerberus's tough hide and only partially lodges itself into the monster's body before bouncing slightly away. The middle head roars furiously toward him. The perfectly calm Vikir starts counting quietly. It walks slowly toward him while growling violently yet. Vikir simply keeps counting. The creature looks at him intensely along with the purple flames in its body. And at his 7th count, the Cerberus stops and jerks. The purple flames vanish as green froth spills from Cerberus's mouths. The giant monster lets out one last painful cry, standing only a single step away from Vikir. Vikir finally lets out a long breath of relief as it collapses. Looking down at the dead Cerberus, he quietly confirms the rumors. The wooden spear he threw earlier was different from the others. It holds a bloody mamba poisonous fang that ultimately kills after 7 steps. And Vikir, who hid it since childhood, sees a piece of the spear partially lodged inside the Cerberus. Soon after, karma begins flowing from the Cerberus corpse and seeps directly into Vikir's body. With that, he finally defeated all 3 heads. Vikir looks at the fallen Cerberus and wonders how to bring it back to the evaluation grounds. He reasons the cause of death is clear, and the guardian knight who saw him prepare the spears will serve as his witness. Then, Vikir's expression soon turns serious again as he thinks of something far more important. Cerberus are known as gatekeepers with a task of guarding territories and protecting hidden dungeons. With that, he recalls the dungeon, a mysterious place where treasures and deadly monsters gather, often claimed as lairs by powerful creatures. Now with the Cerberus dead, that dungeon should be empty. Vikir smears Cerberus manures across his uniform, the stench strong enough to drive weaker creatures away. Vikir searches the area, tracing dried soil, rotten leaves, moist roots, burned footprints, and trails of drool, as he quietly backtracks the monster's path. He continues moving forward. Then finally, he finds the dungeon that the Cerberus was guarding, a dark entrance hidden within the mountain itself. Vikir stares at the dungeon entrance as old memories surface. He once entered here in his past life, but only 10 years later, when it had already been emptied of all value. Right now, that is not the case. At the entrance, Vikir senses mana hidden beneath the rotten air flowing from underground. The energy remains thick and untouched, proving no one has cleared this place yet. He further comments that no light can even be seen from below, meaning the dungeon likely stretches far deeper than he originally expected. Then a smile filled with amusement and thrill spreads across his face as excitement quietly burns inside his crimson eyes. Without hesitation, Vikir steps forward and begins walking deeper into the complete darkness, wondering what kind of treasures awaits him. As Vikir steps deeper into the dungeon, the air immediately grows heavier around him. Faint red lights flicker across his face from every direction, making the darkness feel strangely alive. Vikir scans the walls, veins of ruby minerals spreading like blood vessels through stone. Their crimson glow dimly lights the cavern as he realizes this dungeon connects to Red All Mountain. Then, a few steps ahead, a much brighter crimson light appears before him. Vikir concludes that this must be the entrance to the dungeon's chamber. Vikir instinctively raises one hand to shield his eyes while continuing forward through the overwhelming brightness. Vikir steps into a vast stone chamber. At its center stands an altar, and above it floats a massive ruby crystal glowing with fierce red light, its radiance spilling across the walls and bathing the chamber in crimson. Vikir walks towards the crystal and comments that the dungeon remains illuminated because mana has been imbued directly into the ruby themselves. Then suddenly, something catches his attention. Vikir realizes someone was here before him as he sees a human corpse stripped of flesh, leaving only rotting bones and paper across the stone floor. Vikir approaches the remains and inspects them closely. The skeleton's wounds reveal stabbing, with dried brown bloodstains marking the damage. His eyes then catch a paper beside the corpse, which he carefully picks up. Judging by the condition of the remains, Vikir concludes the person must have died a very long time ago. As Vikir begins reading the letter, he learns of the writer's pseudonym as Cain. Vikir recognizes the handwriting as Baskerville's style, confirming the corpse must have been a Baskerville. Continuing through the letter, Vikir learns that the writer left behind a warning so future generations would never repeat the same mistake he did. According to the letter, the stone chamber had long existed in Baskerville lore as little more than a legend. By chance, he and his brother Abel discovered the hidden dungeon together and chose to raid it with multiple trials. After defeating all monsters, the brothers reached the chamber where Vikir now stands, seeking the final assignment. But everything changed there. The last trial trapped them for an unimaginable length of time. Vikir cannot believe how desperately the brothers must have wanted the treasure to endure 3 years inside. In that case, the final assignment must still be hidden within this room. Then Vikir slowly glances back toward the massive ruby crystal floating above the altar. Looking closer, he notices strange words carved beneath the crystal itself. An unknown passage is written there, like a riddle waiting to be solved. When entering, it is 1. Once inside, it becomes 2. When leaving, it returns to 1. The moment Vikir reads, Cain's words echo in his mind. The letter tells how he and Abel spent endless time pondering the meaning of those ominous lines until the brothers reached a conclusion. Because Cain and Abel were twins, they once existed as one in their mother's womb before birth separated them. To claim the treasure, they believed the two brothers needed to become one again. That conclusion destroyed everything. The once close brothers eventually stood facing one another inside the very chamber with swords drawn in their hands. Both understood what the other was thinking. Only one person could leave with the treasure. Then, in that moment, blood stained the room. Cain's letter tells how the twins entered a brutal battle to the death, each desperate to be the one who remained. In the end, Cain killed his brother Abel. But even after his brother's death, nothing changed. The dungeon remained silent as no treasure appeared. The ruby rejected their answer to the riddle, leaving Cain's act meaningless. He had murdered his brother for nothing. Overwhelmed by guilt and hopelessness, Cain abandoned all desire for the treasure and prepared to leave the dungeon. Before leaving, Cain wrote a warning for whoever might one day discover the devil's den. He urged them to leave at once, for there is nothing to gain here. This dungeon is only a cursed place meant to mock human greed. Vikir tosses the letter aside, unimpressed by the tragedy within its pages. To him, the brothers only came here to kill each other and leave with nothing. Then he points out one fact: he does not even have a twin brother. The brothers misunderstood its meaning entirely, as the riddle is still the same. Vikir slowly falls into deep thought while staring at the ruby crystal above the altar. The riddle echoes in Vikir's mind as he analyzes every corner of the dungeon. He thinks deeply, certain of one truth: there is no dungeon in this world that cannot be solved. Then suddenly, something clicks inside his mind. His eyes slowly shift toward Abel's corpse lying nearby. And in that moment, Vikir fully understands the answer. A confident smile spreads across his face. To Vikir, Cain and Abel were simply unlucky. Because there were 2 of them, they became trapped by a fixed idea from the start, interpreting the riddle too literally. Vikir turns and walks toward the ruby crystal. The answer lies within the dungeon itself. Entering the dark passageway, he remains alone, and that makes 1. As the ruby's light falls upon him, a shadow forms. Suddenly, 1 becomes 2. Without hesitation, Vikir clenches his fist and violently smashes the ruby crystal apart with his bare hand. The crystal explodes. At that exact moment, Vikir confidently declares the answer: shadow. The shattered ruby pieces crash across the stone floor, emitting thick dark smoke into the chamber. Then slowly, the fragments begin floating upward, while a crimson aura starts radiating from them more intensely than before. Vikir's eyes widen slightly with excitement as he now finally sees the reason behind the 2 brothers' deaths. Above the altar, a black sword slowly reveals itself within the crimson aura, heavy pressure filling the chamber as dark energy pulses violently enough to shake the air. Vikir immediately realizes that it is the true relic hidden within the devil's den. The black sword radiates a terrifying crimson aura, 3 slits along the blade glowing like watching eyes. Then Vikir notices the ancient writing upon the altar beneath it. The passage conveys that only those carrying Baskerville blood may claim Beelzebub. The moment Vikir speaks the sword's name aloud, realization strikes him as he understands where this weapon originated. A distant childhood memory resurfaces in Vikir's mind. In his previous life, he once saw an illustration in an old picture book. The gluttonous fly, Beelzebub, a creature with 3 slitted eyes glowing like the sword. It is an ancient calamity spoken of only in legend, belonging to the devil's holy constellations known as the 7 Calamities. According to legend, when the 7 Calamities invaded the continent long ago, the heads of the 7 great families stepped forward to fight them personally. The first patriarch of the Baskerville family fought against Beelzebub itself. After its defeat, the monster's remains were sealed within Baskerville territory, its lingering demonic energy drawing monsters endlessly to the surrounding lands. As the legends were true all along, in his past life, the blade was found and stolen by demon clans, and once they wielded it, countless humans fell beneath its power. Vikir declares that what happened before will never happen again in this life, as he will take it, and his hand closes firmly around the sword's handle. As he pulls the blade, crimson aura erupts, monstrous power trembling within as spiraling energy bursts outward like fire. Vikir groans in pain, clutching his shoulder as the sword shifts and flows into his hand. Black, ominous aura crawls through his veins like living shadows. In an instant, silence falls as the crimson light vanishes, and dark veins spread across his skin. Suddenly, a black sword with a crimson blade manifests from the back of his hand, fused to his flesh as if part of his body. Its form mirrors the slitted eyes of the gluttonous fly. Vikir stares at the steaming sword as he comments that he luckily obtained a blade created from the corpse of a devil's holy constellation, Beelzebub. Then slowly, an intense grin spreads across his face. Lifting the newly manifested blade before his eyes, Vikir wonders just how much stronger he will become in this new life. And for the first time since regressing, he genuinely feels excited to find out. As Vikir glances at the chamber, he mutters that nothing good remains and turns to leave. Vikir's eyes widen as sweat beads down his face, the chamber twisting while his vision spirals into chaos. Then darkness presses closer to Vikir as it tries to engulf him. In an instant, Vikir bends down as his body weakens, confused as to what his body is reacting to. Then the Beelzebub in his hand shrieks as Vikir realizes it wants to satiate its hunger. He walks outside, clutching his stomach. Sweat drenches him as hunger twists inside his stomach, the heightened scent of something delicious pulling at his senses. In an instant, Vikir is startled as his hand, bound to Beelzebub, moves on its own. Vikir's body moves in sync, listening to Beelzebub's consciousness. He asks if it wants to eat something that lies ahead, waiting in the direction they are going. Then what lies ahead is the corpse of the hellhound he killed earlier. In an instant, Beelzebub pierces the hellhound's corpse, feeding on it like a mosquito while a crimson aura flows. As Beelzebub feeds on the corpse, Vikir feels his own hunger ease. A faint realization crosses him, perhaps it is simply because he has not eaten for a long time. His thoughts drift to the dried trees and barren soil of Le Rouge at Le Noir Mountain, fearing it is the result of Beelzebub's insatiable hunger. He curses the endless burden of feeding it, forced to console its relentless binge. The Beelzebub's blade slips free from the corpse, shuddering in delight as gluttonous fulfillment drives it to climax. Suddenly, a crimson status window appears, revealing Beelzebub's 3 skill slots. One of them is already occupied by Hemorrhage Hellhound, a B+ level skill under the Glutton of Flies. Vikir lifts his hand as Beelzebub's innate power manifests before him. As he recalls, it is said to possess the power to absorb an opponent's skills into itself. With an almost limitless capacity for absorption, countless individuals are rumored to have lost their abilities and been rendered useless. He continues, explaining that because of its volatile nature, he can only steal up to 3 abilities for now. His gaze shifts to Hellhound's Hemorrhage, a skill that relentlessly draws out an opponent's blood, even from the faintest of wounds. An idea sparks in Vikir's mind as he understands the implications of his ability to steal skills. He gazes back at the body of the Cerberus corpse. Without warning, Beelzebub stirs, releasing a crimson-black aura that sends a jolt of shock through Vikir, who is trying to stop it. He scratches his head as he talks to Beelzebub, whose blade continues to grow on its own, extending and pulsing with crimson energy, saying that if the corpse is too heavily damaged, it will be difficult to explain the cause during autopsy. Vikir watches in silence as Beelzebub ignores him completely and resumes devouring the corpse. Unable to take it anymore, he slaps it and commands it to stop eating. The sword lets out a whimper of pain from Vikir's slap. Then, suddenly, 3 skill slots fill up Burn Injury Cerberus of A+ level, Hemorrhage Hellhound of B+ level, and High Speed Regeneration, Norvegicus Sewer Rat of F level. The third skill, High Speed Regeneration, catches his attention. Looking back at the corpse, he spots a poor dead rat lying beneath the Cerberus and instantly understands the reason. He picks up the dead rat, noting that gaining burn injury from the Cerberus is a solid achievement. He adds that since thermalgia is among the most excruciating a human can endure, it would be far worse than the hellhound's hemorrhage. He lifts his head, gazing up at the night sky. With the monster for the practical exam already prepared, he considers staying here a while longer. After the practical examinations, the young hounds return to Baskerville, some scarred, injured, and wrapped in bandages as they make their way back. A formal evaluation followed. The young hounds presented their hunts and were rewarded with shields, swords, or necklaces, each made from monster parts they've killed during the practical exams. But then, Pavlov and the shadow guards present are left surprised as they behold a monster brought forward by a young hound. The report is submitted, and within the Patriarch's office, Hugo's expression is split between astonishment and curiosity over who managed to capture the monster. The head butler informs Hugo that it was caught by Master Vikier van Baskerville, who had apparently crossed into a restricted area during the practical exam and slain a Cerberus of A+ risk rating. Hugo notes that the Cerberus is a high-ranking monster even the Guardian Knights avoid. Barrymore explains it was already injured by a barbarian tribe, and the young master used a poisoned wooden spear to kill it. Hugo then wonders what poison could have killed it and how Vikier obtained it. Barrymore reports that the hunting journal contains nothing further, and that when he inquired again, the young master excused himself due to exhaustion from the exam. Hugo holds his chin and snickers at what he learns, commenting on Vikier's sly actions despite his age, then remarks that information is power and power is one's worth. Barrymore comments in surprise that a master named Van, not Lee or Law, would possess such talent. Hugo answers flatly that the butler likely does not know, leaving Barrymore puzzled by his response. Hugo smiles and says he is unlike past Baskerville patriarchs. When raising a hound, he does not care for bloodline. He only cares for the ability they possess and their ferocity. Looking outside the window, Hugo ends that even royals are not exempted from becoming mutts. Barrymore breaks into a sweat and apologizes while thinking that the patriarch might be concerned over his second son's isolation training. Hugo then tells him it's fine and that he simply needs a mood booster. Barrymore responds that he will call Master Vikier. Minutes later, Vikier stands in the patriarch's office, wearing an innocent expression, a faint smile on his lips, hands hidden behind his back. Hugo tells Vikier that he has heard he captured his Cerberus during the practical exam and asks how he accomplished it. Vikier then calmly responds with a smile that he put chocolate on his wooden spear. Hugo is briefly confused by the mention of chocolate, but Vikier explains it is a lethal poison to canine-type monsters. Hugo smirks and asks if that is why Vikier requested it earlier, and Vikier confirms without hesitation. Watching them, Barrymore wonders if this is how a father and son are supposed to talk. Hugo then says he heard Vikier failed to properly respond when the butler asked about the hunt and inquires why. With no trace of emotion and hesitation, Vikier states that Barrymore is not his master. Satisfied with the answer, Hugo asks who his master is, which Vikier replies that the master of the clan is his master. Hugo then comments that he has learned well. Hugo declares that the Cerberus Vikier hunted will be his alone, and that he will grant any wish as the top scorer. Listening to the Patriarch's words, Vikier clenches both fists. In an instant, the Patriarch and the head butler are shocked to hear Vikier requesting to gain access to the 10,000 Epistle Library. Deep within the Baskerville clan lies the 10,000 Epistle Library, known to be one of the Empire's largest libraries. Hugo's gaze sharpens at the mention of the library, and he asks if Vikier is aware that only the Patriarch, the Vice Patriarch, and direct lineage are allowed inside. Vikier closes his eyes and says he will yield if he denies him access. Yet, in truth, his mind is already turning to ways of sneaking in. But then, Vikier's eyes widen in shock as Hugo permits him to enter. Hugo smiles, instructing Vikier to read the Baskerville 6th technique in the 6th restricted zone. Vikier stands confused, unable to understand why Hugo would grant him permission, as never before had an illegitimate bearing the Van name been permitted beyond the 4th technique. Vikier composes himself, noting that Hugo currently stands at the Baskerville 7th technique, and before his regression, he had reached the 9th fang. Vikier is reminded of his vow at the guillotine he will surpass Hugo. He will surpass him. Once he obtains Baskerville's greatest core, the swordsmanship record of the first patriarch who subdued the 7 great disasters. Vikier looks at the man who will hand over the book, the same crimson eyes reflecting his own, that tells him he looks forward to his progress. After hearing his words, Vikier then bows, his eyes filled with intensity, and thanks the patriarch, saying he will surely surpass his expectations. Vikier's thoughts darken as Hugo has no idea what true value lies in the book he is about to hand over.